Hey everyone, time for another video, and this time I will be having a look at something that I again will have a hard time getting into frame, and that is this here Club Rapier GDF from HF Armory from Ukraine. Before we get to that though, formalities out of the way as per usual. First and foremost, paid for this with my own money, and HF Armory was not aware that there was going to be a review. Still quite didn't pay full price for this, because this was part of a larger club order and we got a rebate because of that. Another thing I feel the need to point out is that I'm not really a rapier fencer. It's not something I'm wholly unacquainted with. I've got some rapier lessons in the very early days of our club. I have gotten some rapier lessons at events I was at. I've read Capo Ferro, I've read into some other sources, but it's not something that I really do. Mostly something just for fun. I think it shows, you'll notice when you see the clip of me moving it around actually. But I do have a number of years of just experience in fencing, so I think while I might not be able to tell you if this is a good rapier for what you do specifically, I still think I can give an opinion on whether this is overall a sword worth looking at. The general structure of the video, of course, not to forget that, will be the same as always, meaning there will be the actual review of this part here, where I go over the ordering process, why I actually got it, what it actually is, stats, things I noticed while handling, and then there will be the stats again, so you can look at them and pause. Some more pictures showing of things that don't quite get shown well on the camera, like here in this room. And then there will also be the clip where you can see me moving it around. The timestamps will be in the description as always. Just use them to just jump to the parts that really interest you. And with that, why did I actually get this? If I'm not a rapier fencer, as I said. Well, rapiers were actually one of the type of swords that got me really interested into fencing. I watched way too many cloak and dagger films growing up. So when we were looking at ordering something from HF Armory, that is one of the types of swords that I was looking at, really. And I was particularly interested in how good this could be for the price, because at the point of ordering, this was priced at 165 euros at their webpage. And I knew other people were looking into that as well, so I thought that, hey, if we have more rapiers around in my club, maybe it would be a perfect excuse to actually spend some time on it again. Overall, that made a nice package where it was quite easy for me to just pull the trigger and just give this a try, really. They do have a nice webpage that I think you can still order through, but as I'm sure you're aware, at the point of this video, there's a war going on in Ukraine. They have been invaded by Russia and they are fighting for their freedom over there. So they don't always have everything in stock. Frankly, I find it amazing that they managed to just keep the lights on and still bring things back online through everything that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, really. So it is at the moment best to go and just contact them and check what they can actually get. I think this one actually got back in stock not too long before we actually ordered. I contacted them through Facebook. That is where I got my bill after finalizing my order. That is where I told them that I paid for the whole thing by a wire transfer. Actually had to check back with my bank because they needed me to tell them where it went to, because sanctions for the occupied regions and everything. But that is also then where I got my tracking numbers. It was sent out in 2 parcels because it was a bigger order. Overall, I'm really quite happy with the whole process. I had to prod them for the tracking number at a point, but still they were in general quite responsive and also really just nice to deal with. When the order arrived, which was actually quicker than I thought it would be, just trying to remember the dates, I did finalize the order on the 6th of June. I got the confirmation that they were sent out with a tracking number on the 27th, and on the 9th of July is when the 2 parcels actually were with me then together. They arrived, I think, a day or 2 apart from each other. And when opening the orders, when I checked everything, there was actually a piece missing, a pommel for a small sword. But I contacted them, told them that the piece was missing, and they just sent it after, and that's when we basically had everything then. So thumbs up, that was really quite a good experience. The packaging was overall okay, nothing bad really, but one of the rather thin rapier quillins, this one here actually, did poke out because they were just sent like this. And that means that this one is bent a little. Nothing too dramatic. If you had a proper workspace, you could just easily bend this back. I don't though at the moment, which is why this still looks like it does. It doesn't hinder the function really, it's mostly cosmetic at this point, but that is something where I think they could improve a bit by just taping some extra cardboard over these very, very thin quillins to make sure that this doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen quite as easily. International shipping is always rough, so all sorts of things can happen, but yeah, that's something I would say to keep in mind really. But still, overall, good experience, thumbs up for that from me really. And what I got then when everything was with us was a sword that is longer than I actually thought from the pictures, to be honest. It's an overall length of 123.5 centimeters. Of that, 104.5 centimeters is the blade to the cup. There's a portion of it in the cup, of course. The actual grip is nice and short, 8.5 centimeters, and then you have 4 centimeters of rather substantial pommel. I like the blade in particular, I have to say. It's fairly straight, fairly typical rapier form just by profile looking at it. It starts out at 17 millimeters at the cup. At the point of balance, it's at 16 millimeters at the middle of the blade, it's 13 millimeters, and then just before the folded tip, it's 8 millimeters, and that's also the actual folded tip. Distal taper, this is nice stock, I have to say. It's 6 millimeters at the cup. And then we go to 5 millimeters at the point of balance, 3 millimeters in the middle of the blade. No, rewind. 4 millimeters at the middle of the blade, 3 that's at the tip, and then you have 7 for the actual folded tip. It's a fairly small point, I would say, but we fenced without a tip and it was fine. Folded tips, rolled tips are not my favorite, I have to say, but it worked out quite well. Overall, the blade strikes a really nice balance between being flexible enough for being safe, even for deeper thrusts, and still being stiff enough where it counts for a nice blade feel. Moving back to the actual cup, it's, I think, 14.5 centimeters, so a nice size. It has rolled edges, which is quite nice for sturdiness, but it makes it kind of hard to actually find out what the material thickness of it is. I think it is about 1 millimeter if I manage to get it right. That means it will get some dents if you do actually fence against cups and catch some, fence against cuts and catch some on the cup. I have one here, but it will not crumble, and if you do mainly thrust fencing, then it's just perfectly fine, really. Moving on to the cross, it's 28 centimeters across. The material is just pretty much a square bar of 6 millimeters with a little bit of flaring at the end, some nice touches here. The grip is pretty flat. Basically, it's just 2 centimeters, and it's about 3 centimeters, 2.9 in the width, and then it moves from a square profile to a round one at the actual pommel. I quite like how this feels, really, whether it's 1 finger over the cross or 2, overall really quite nice. It's a heftier sword than I thought it would be, because this weighs in at 1009-ish grams, so 1 kilogram roundabout, and it overall has a POB of 6 centimeters from the cup. Handling it, as I said, somehow from the pictures, just one of the first things I really noticed is that this is longer than I thought it would be and heftier. It's not quite as long as Capo Ferro would like you to have your rapier, but then again, which rapier on the market it really is, because in my case that would mean from the soles to my armpit that the blade alone would have to be something like 130 centimeters, which is longer than the sword is overall, which would make things quite hard to get right when it comes to flex and weight people actually want to handle, and also shipping and transporting for yourself. So this is overall a nice balance, I think. All in all, just I like handling it. One detail I like is that the cross where your finger actually meets it is twisted and rounded. So that makes it quite comfortable. And also the part of the blade in the cup is, I think, 6 millimeters by 11. And it's also rounded, which is really quite nice. Not everyone does that. There's a bit of sharp edge at the very middle of the cross. But overall, rounded where it really needs to be, which is a nice touch for that class of rapier. The pommel is quite substantive, as I said. I've read that some people actually have made better experiences with just replacing that. I have just left it as it is. But that brings me to another thing that is actually quite nice, that everything here is replaceable. You can just unscrew the pommel and replace it. That is also nice, because swords are a tool. In the end, everyone will give out at some point. If you keep using it, it makes it really nice to just replace things where you need. The aesthetics of the sword are probably a bit of a matter of taste. Personally, I like the more historic look of many pieces that I have, but I can appreciate this as well, which is pretty much just a modern sports equipment for HEMA as a modern sport. I can appreciate that. One thing I found that with the current lineup is that the matted part is really prone to rusting, so you really kind of have to take care of that and either polish it yourself or just regularly really oil it. I'll have to oil it after handling it all the time like that. There's a spot here, for example. I think that is already neutralized, but yeah, that is something to keep in mind, really. Still, overall, I have to say, I really quite like this. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything bad, but I like this more than I thought I would. This is a nice sword overall, especially at the price point, right? Again, at the point of ordering on the webpage, 165 euros. This is a good sword that you can get if you need something where you can get a number of for your club, for loaning, really. It's also a nice sword if, like me, you don't really do rapier, but maybe you're curious, maybe you hope to be able to put some time into it, or maybe you just started out and you don't quite know what you actually want and what you like, and you don't quite want to commit the funds for a higher tier of rapier, and that's a good choice, certainly, I would say. Or maybe you just don't have the funds. I certainly remember how it was when I started out as a student. But even all of these scenarios aside, I really have to say that this is a nice sword, not even for the price, but just in general. It's not perfect, but there's certainly worse options out there, I would say. And given that it is, threaded, if there's something that you really don't quite like as much, like for example maybe the pommel, then get another one. I particularly like the blade, I have to say. Just that one really feels quite nice for me. I like the flex and the stiffness of it, both at the same time. So overall, I really have to say, thumbs up from me. Cheers.